Okay. So today was the yahrzeit of Rabbi Psudis. His last name was Sudis because it's Soros, but his mother's name was Sarah, and he took on his mother's name as his last name. I don't know why, but he was a Talmud of the Baal Shem Tov, and his father was a Lamed Vav Tzaddik, and his whole life he would run around raising money, and he would give money to the Lamed Vav Tzaddikim. Don't ask me how he identified them. I don't think you were able to self-nominate for that particular fund. But he was a very, very holy Yid. There's a Vart. My family has a personal connection with him. He saved my grandfather's life, going back 8 to 10 generations. And although it's a story that's passed down in my family from generation to generation, I heard it on a Yiddish children's tape. That's how I heard about it. But I just want to tell you a beautiful Vart that he said over to the Baal Shem. He asked the Baal Shem a question, and the Baal Shem says, "Why don't you propose an answer?" And he asked the Baal Shem, the measurements, the dimensions of a teva is 300 by 100 by 300 by 50 by 30 by 1, right? So it was 300 long, it was 50 wide, it was 30 high, and vel ama techalena milamayla. So what is the significance of those measurements? So he asked about Shem. The Shem said, "Why don't you suggest a teretz?" So he said that generally there's always good and bad. There's never pure evil. There's never pure good. Things are all mixed together, and that's why ches, which represent chet, the Yetzer Hara is referred to as the nachash. It's surrounded by the nun and the shin, which represent good. Ches is chet. It's sort of somewhat contained. It's the same thing with the samach mem. It's spelled samach mem aleph lamed. I'm sorry. I don't know. I'm not so versed in Kabbalah. And then samach mem kale. Hashem's name is fused into the name of the Satan. But by the Dora Mabala got so bad that the evil was so evil. Sometimes you have to amputate and start over again. So they had to amputate the good from the bad and save it at the teva and then start a new world. So therefore, the nun and the shin is 300, which represents the length of the teva. Nun is 50, which represents the width of the teva. And aleph lamed represents the height of the teva, 30 amas, and the one is alamat techalenu milamayla. So when he said that word, the Baal Shem liked that word. So I think that's a good shot. So that's the word. The story is going back 8 to 10 generations, in the time of Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac Mikalev. Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac was a Kalev Rebbe, the first Kalev Rebbe, and he was an orphan. And because he was an orphan, they were very poor, so he would shepherd the sheep of his family, his mother. He worked for his mother. And one day, the Rabbi Psudis met this young little orphan, and he saw that he had a dahibud in the shuman. So he went to the mother and he said, "I'll give you whatever money you want, but I want to send him to Reb Shmelkim in Nikolsburg that he should train him how to become a rebbe." And that's what happened. And he became one of the biggest rebbes, and he actually had Gilu Eliyahu on a regular basis. Somebody told me that there's a Rosh Yeshiva in America who said, I'll only throw out a boy from yeshiva for 2 reasons: for Gilu Arayas and for Gilu Eliyahu. but the Kalev Rebbe had Gilu Eliyahu on a regular basis, and my grandfather was very, very close with the Kalev Rebbe. My grandfather would always ask the Kalev Rebbe, "I don't understand. You see him all the time. Why can't you introduce him to me? Just once introduce me to him." So they were once walking, my grandfather with the Kalev Rebbe. I'm sorry. That's right. And this beautiful coach pulls up, and a Duke opens the door and he says, "Ziten, Efsher hotter atzind." He wanted a light for a cigarette. So my grandfather had the first Bic lighter ever made, and he pulled it out. Or it was probably the precursor to the Bic. It was the prototype, and he gave him a snap, and he lit him up. And the Duke says, "Von Elech Ejid, Elech Nemen atzind," and off he goes. A couple of minutes later, the Kalev Rebbe tells him, "By the way, that was Eliyahu Hanavi." So on my grandfather's cave, if you go to Kalev in Hungary today, it's on the stone. It says, "This is a man who Eliyahu Hanavi called him an Erlich Yid." He's right there in the graveyard. And so when my niece said the story over in school once, the teacher says, "It's impossible. It's impossible Eliyahu Hanavi would smoke." It can't be a true story. But the story with my grandfather being saved, one day Rabbi Psudis rolls into town, and any dignitary who came to town would typically stay by my grandfather. So he was there, and he tells my grandfather, "Go to the parts and tell him to come. Leibel wants to speak to him right now." So my grandfather said, with all the respect to that, but it doesn't quite work that way. There's guards and there's appointments and there's a moat. Even you can't just walk in. He said, if you don't go, I'll send somebody else. So my grandfather went, and he felt like really stupid walking up to the porridge's estate, and for some wild reason they just let him walk right in, and he didn't know what was going on. And he tells the porridge, Liba wants to speak to you. So the porridge quickly grabs his, goes, okay, I'm coming right now. And my grandfather didn't have a clue as to what was going on. He comes to his house and he goes to meets Bible students. They're talking for an hour in a closed room. Again, my grandfather had no clue what was going on. And as they finished the conversation, the Bible students, like in a friendly manner, walks the poritz out to the front door to see him off. And he said, oh, by the way, if you ever need to buy a good horse, this Yankel Fish, he knows his horses very well. Take him along. He'll pick you the best horse. My grandfather thinking, what are you talking about? I don't know the first thing about horses, but like he kept his mouth shut. He knows that we're talking about a big rebbe. Sure. Didn't take too much longer. A Christian kid who used to work for my great grandfather went missing. And the priest of the city said eyewitness testimony that he saw Yankel Fish kill the kid. It's a blood libel. And then he brought dozens of witnesses that all witnessed this kid being murdered by my grandfather. So he was in deep trouble. He was in deep trouble, and the trial date was set to sometime in the future, and he didn't know what he was going to do. He didn't know what he was going to do. One day, the poritz comes to him and says, "I need to go. There's a big market. There's a big show, fair of horses in the next town. I need you to come with me because my friend Leib told me you know how to pick horses." So he's thinking, what am I going to do now? I don't know the first thing I'm going to do. I'll go along. So he gets into the wagon of the poritz, and they pull up to the city where the market is. And sitting on the curb is a little homeless, filthy kid crying. So the poritz stops. I guess it was a decent poritz. And he opens up his door. He says, "Kiddo, come over here. What's the story over here?" So the kid's crying and crying. And Yankel Fish looks at the kid and says, "This is the kid I killed. This is the kid I killed." He says, "What are you doing here?" Just because the priest told me that I have to disappear for a year. And if I show back up in our city within the year, he's going to kill me and my whole family. But I'm homeless. I have nobody. I want to go home. So the poritz says, "No problem. You just come with me. I'll take good care of you." So my uncle realized that he was pretty good at picking horses. And they ended up going back to the city. And the day of the trial, the poritz are sitting there in the benches, like like the spectators. And the priest says his testimony, and they bring in all the different witnesses saying testimony. It was looking really, really bad. Then the poritz says, "I actually have a witness too. Is it okay if I present him?" It's a sure. And in walks the kid. So he said, through that, my great grandfather's life was saved. Okay, gewaltig. That was the story of a Bleib Sudas. So yesterday we were learning the Mishnah that talks about hektish betos. The Mishnah says, I'm going to tell you about a machlokes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel about hektish betos. And the whole makor of hektish betos was from Tmura. If someone wanted to make this animal into a Tmura of a shlomim, and for some reason the word that came out of his mouth was a rezu Tmuras oila, it's a Tmuras oila. That's a Tmura betos. So we wanted to extrapolate. If soif hektish, if you could make a Tmura betos, who in hektish could be done betos? And the case of the Mishnah at first glance was someone said, I have a barn full of animals. The first animal or ox, the first ox, and the black one that comes out of the barn first, that should be hektish. And what came out? A white ox came out. So the Havamni the Gemara was, which is going to end up being the Maskana of the Gemara as well, is that white ox, even though it was mistakenly made as hektish, it is going to become hektish. Rav Papa told us, because the Gemara found it too difficult to extrapolate from Tamura to this case, because by Tamura, sure, a mistake was made, but at the end of the day, the words that he said are what chal, even though that's not what he wanted. He wanted Tamur Shlamim. He said Tamur Shlamim becomes a Tamur Shlamim. Here, he wanted a black ox, and you're saying a white ox is going to become Kadosh? That was too far of a stretch. So because of that, Rav Papa decided that our Mishnah is not talking about hektish betos at all. It's not talking about the technical term hektish betos, but yeah, there was a mistake here. And what he really said was that I want the first black ox that leaves the barn. That's the ox that should become hektish. And that's exactly what happens. although a white ox came out first, we wait until a black ox comes out. And of course, we have to also learn that there wasn't just one white ox and one black ox. There must have been multiple black oxes in the barn. And that's why he said, I want the first black ox that comes out to be Kaddish. That's how Rav Papa wanted to learn our Mishnah and say that, in fact, we have no proof whatsoever that Beis Shammai holds that the technical term of Hektish Betos is going to be Hektish. But the Gemara said, you're right, from our Mishnah, you don't have a riot. But in fact, Beis Shammai actually does hold Hektish Betos is Hektish. And we know that from a Mishnah that we're going to learn today. The Gemara preempted us with that Mishnah already yesterday. And the Mishnah was talking about there were 6 people walking down the road, and coming up towards them was someone who they couldn't quite see clearly. And the first person online said, if that guy's Reuven, I want to be a Nazir. The second guy said, if that guy's not Reuven, I would want to be a Nazir. The third guy said, this is like a sitcom. The third guy said, if one of you 2 guys are a Nazir, then I want to be a Nazir. The fourth guy said, if one of you 2 guys are not a Nazir, then I want to be a Nazir. The fifth guy said, if both of you are Nazirim, I want to be a Nazir. And the second guy said, if you're all Nazirim, I want to be a Nazir. And Beis Shammai said, they're all Nazirim. So you see clearly, that's clearly Hektish Betos, because the guy who said, if it's Ruvain, it should be a Nazir. If it wasn't Ruvain, how come he's a Nazir? Right? They can't both be Nazirim. So Beis Shammai learns that he wanted to be Makabel Naziris no matter what. He wanted to talk about who that guy was. But you see from there that even Betos, it's Chal. And therefore, even though Rav Papa had an alternative way of learning our Mishnah, the fact of the matter is, Beis Shammai holds that Hektish Betos is Hektish, and therefore, instead of learning Beis Shammai in our alternative explanation, let's learn Beis Shammai is saying what he means, that Hektish Betos is Hektish, and therefore, if someone said the first ox that comes out of my barn, the black one, should be Kodesh, and the white one comes out, the white one is in fact Kodesh. The white one is in fact Kodesh, because you see, Beis Shammai holds that Hektish Betos have a Hektish. And that's where we got up to with Rav Papa. Rav Papa Halacha L'Maisa learns that Beis Shammai holds Hektish Betos is Hektish, and that means, if I said, and I like reading the words inside, Shor Shachar Sheyetze Mi Beisi Rishon Hareyu Hektish, the black ox that comes out of my house first should be Hektish, and the white one came out, the white one is Hektish. How do you know that from Tamura? Tamura, you're following his words. So Toshu says, we'll extract that from Tamura. We won't make a big deal about that. Beis Shammai still holds that is something that you can learn from Tamura, that Hektish Betos is Hektish. No, because he meant the first one. His mistake was that he said it was black. Hektish Betos have a Hektish, even though he mistakenly said it was black. It's funny because he said the first ox that comes out of my house. That means his house probably looks like a barn. So I don't know what his house looks like. Okay. Zogt the Heilige Gemara weiter. Abaye says, no, I think the maskana of how Rav Papa is learning our Mishnah is a little bit too extreme. It's a little bit too extreme to say that if I said the first ox, the black ox that comes out of my house first, should be a carbon, should be Kodesh, and a white one came out, that's too much of a stretch. That would not become Kodesh. But I still subscribe to the fact that Hektish Betos is Hektish according to Beis Shammai. It is not such a radical case to say that when I said black, the white one will become Kodesh. And Zokt Abaye Omar, Abaye said, Loi Kasol Kadaita. It doesn't make sense to say that the case of our Mishnah is like we've been learning until now, which is the Kohen B'Tzafra. The guy gets up in the morning and he says, I want this and this animal to be Kodesh. That's not the case. You know what's shot in our Mishnah? It's not Sheyotza mi be. It's not Sheyetze mi beisoy. So let's read the words of the Mishnah so we have clarity. If I can get the page turned. So the Mishnah says, Ketzad Amar Shar Shachar Sheyetze mi beisi rishon. That's how we looked until now. The animal that will come. He's saying, don't put a tzere under the yud, put a kamash under the yud. Shar Shachar Sheyotza mi beisi rishon. And he's not standing before the animals left. He's standing after the animals left. And he's referring to something that had already occurred. And we're going to soon see why that makes a difference. Abai Amar, Loika Sol Kadaitach, the Kohen B'Tzafra. it's not speaking where this happened before the event. He's standing in the afternoon after the animal came out. And he said, and then, so either the first ox that came out, which was a black one, should be hektish. They told him, pal, you made a mistake. Lavan nafak. It was a white one that came out. So how did he think it was black? I mean, it was either black or white. So Tosfos tells us that he didn't actually see it, but he knew his herd so well that he heard the gate of there. So we have herd with an A and herd without A, and we have gate with a G-A-I-T, not G-A-T, right? So he was able to hear from the way the animal walked which animal it was. That's how well he thought he knew his herd. So he heard one animal from his herd coming out, and he thought he recognized the gait of the animal coming out of the gate. What? That's right. He knew much about that. He knew much about these oxen as my grandfather knew about those horses. Dr. Seuss was about horses. That's why he's Dr. Seuss, right? If you have a Dr. Seuss and we have a Rabbi Ox, right? So Dr. Gemara, the Amrullah, they told him, it was in fact a white ox that came out. And he said, if I would have known it was a white, I still wanted the first animal to be hektish. I would have never said like I'm a shacher. So there, in fact, the white one becomes kodesh. So let's think, what's the difference if it happened before, if it happened after? Zok Tosfos is very, very beautiful. If it happened after a fact, it's not a t'nai. I'm basing my comments on fact. It happened already. I happen to be wrong, but the fact is the fact. So if I said I want to make the first animal that comes out of the gate kodesh, the black one, I only said the black one because I thought it was black. But without a doubt, I want that first animal to become kodesh. So therefore, that's called a tos b'hektish, because it's surely that I wanted the first animal that came out to be kodesh. The mistake is that I identified it wrong, but I still want it to be kodesh. That's a mistake that you could say happened when it's after the fact. But before the fact, in the morning, if I'm saying I want the first black ox that comes out to be kodesh, you can't possibly say that I thought I knew which one it was, because nobody can predict the future. After it happened, I could convince myself wrongly that it was a black ox instead of a white ox. But before it happened, I'm for sure not convincing myself. I know I don't know which one will come out. So then you cannot interpret his words the same way. You would interpret his words as a t'nai. If the first ox that comes out is black, then I want it to be kodesh. If not, I don't want anything to be kodesh. So Zok Abaye, the case that you, Rav Papa, said would be a hektish b'tos, and the first one, which was the white ox, will be kodesh, I disagree with that. That would be a regular t'nai, where the person said, if the first one that comes out is black, then I want it. If not, no. So it wouldn't be kodesh at all. Where is it kodesh? That's where I for sure wanted it to be kodesh. I just made a mistake in my identification. And there we say hektish, b'tos hektish, but not in such a wild case where it's only like a t'nai. So Abaye is saying that he's limiting the scope of hektish b'tos to only a case where we know for sure he wanted the first one to be hektish, he just misidentified it. So once again, Abaye is learning that our Mishnah is not speaking about someone who's talking about something that will happen in the future. Rather, it's Sheyotza Mibesi, he's speaking about the past. Correct the Gemara, and I'm focusing on the Mishnah first, and then we'll go back to the Gemara. Okay, so the first case of the Mishnah we can interpret by changing the Nakudos that it's past tense, not future tense. But what about the next case? Dinuzov Sheyala Biyadi. He's clearly saying in the future. So this you can't interpret the same way. So the way Abaye wants to understand hektish b'tos, how is that going to fit? Look at the third case. Chav Shoyayin Shetala. It's also future tense. So how are you going to be able to explain those as also referring to past tense? And that's what the Gemara's question is right over here. So frek the Gemara. Umimatis Amrit, the Kohen B'tiara Askinon. Can you say that we're speaking about after it happened? Vakatani dinner shozov sheyala. Look, Gemara nunu tani sha'ala. That yud, that's not really yud. The cipher dropped a drop of ink, and it looked like a yud, and they didn't check it with the computer, like the Rav said today. Or for pregnant, what about chav shoyayin shetala? So Gemara tani also the cipher was dyslexic, and he mixed up the ayin and the saf and the lam, and he mixed up the letters. but really it's all referring to something that occurred in the past. Now that's the end of the sugya of hektish patos. So we really have a disagreement between Abaye and your Papa what hektish patos is according to Beis Shammai, whether it means even if I say in the future, whichever one comes out first, where Rav Papa says, according to Beis Shammai, the Lavan would become Kadosh, and Abaye said it would not become Kadosh. Abaye says, where do we say hektish patos is hektish? Is if it was in the past. He said the black one that came out first, that's the one I want. There we say it's a hektish patos because he really wants to be hektish, but he just misidentified. Amar Rav Chisda tells us a rule about business. If you want to buy oxen and you want to buy quality oxen, the best color to buy, uchma bechivra laki. If you have a herd of white oxen and there's a black one mixed in, it will devalue the entire herd. The only thing I could think of as to why is because you're choshid that the animals, their gene pool has some black in them, and black is inferior. I have to be careful on YouTube that I don't get thrown out. That black is inferior, and since black is inferior, even one black mixed in amongst the whites drains out the entire value of the white. I remember I was in Lakewood. And there's different ways of referring to parts of a chicken. Some people refer to the breast as the top and the pulka as the bottom, right? But some people refer to the breast as the white meat and the pulka as the black meat. And I believe in the United States they don't use the white and the black meat. They use the term top and bottom. And I was once by a wedding in Lakewood, and there was a black waiter there, and he was serving a bottom to one of the guests. And the guy said, "I don't want black." So the waiter thought that he didn't want to be served by a black waiter. But all I meant was, I don't want the black meat, I want the white meat. So it was a little bit uncomfortable for a couple of minutes there. Anyway, Zok Gemara. What's that? Now for sure I'm getting thrown off YouTube. Zok Gemara, Chivra b'uchmi elokya. Another thing is, if you have a black animal and it has a white patch on it, that's a sign that it had some type of nega, some type of skin disease, and this is like a scab that grew over it. So now the Gemara is going to challenge from our Mishnah, Reb Chisda's comment that black oxen are inferior. Tanan we learned in our Mishnah, Shachar sheyete mi beisi rishayin hektish. That's the words that the man said. Kasol gadaitach, the Gemara makes an assumption which will hold true at the end. Ki makdish by ra makdish. When someone's makdish, he wants to give the bare minimum of what he offered. So if I said black ox and a white ox is superior, there's no way I could have ever had a kavanah that I wanted to be makdish a white ox. But if I said black ox and a white ox is inferior, yeah, then when I said black ox, I didn't care. I could have meant white ox as well. Zok to Gemara, V'ami Beis Shammai. What did Beis Shammai pass in our Mishnah? Have a hektish. The white ox is hektish. Well, if we know for sure when someone says black ox, he wants the bare minimum, he for sure didn't mean that a white ox should become hektish. So you must be wrong, Reb Chisda. And in fact, it must be that a white ox is not superior, rather it's inferior. Zok Rav Chisda, who said, maybe you're wrong about your assumption of how people are makdish. Maybe when people are makdish, they're identifying the least that they want, but they would be happy to upgrade. Who said the donator is a Polisher? Maybe he's an Englisher. He wants to go Baravchis, right? The LMI. Now for sure I'll get thrown off of YouTube. What? The LMI. So what are you going to say? Ben Yafa Makdish. Are you telling me that's when someone is Makdish is Ben Yafa, and that's why the white animal will become Kodesh? That won't fit in very well in the second case. Dinner shall zav sheyala b'yadi risha, v'olav shall kesef. There's no way you can possibly say that kesef is better than zav. Yet the shami are Mekdish. So it's clear from the second case of the Mishnah the rule that a person is ba'ayin raw makdish, and therefore if he said dinner is zav and kesef came out, he's happy with that. He's happy to downgrade. What do you mean the vice versa? It wouldn't work. Well, the Mishnah's case is this. Superior. No, because I never means I only. If I said the dinner is zov, I want a minimum of zov, right? Platinum maybe, but not definitely not kesef. So the elamai ba'ayin ra makdish. So you're going to prove from the Mishnah, in fact, and it's a good proof that it is ba'ayin ra makdish. So if that's the case, let's look at the third case. Chavesh shel yayin shetala b'yadei rishon v'ala shel shemen. Oil is much more valuable than wine, and by Shami Hektish, but Hashem and Adif Miyayin. Oil is more valuable, and if it's Ma'ayin Ra, why would the oil become Kaddish? That's your problem. Don't worry about it, because we're talking in Galil where there was an abundance of oil, and oil is not expensive in Galil. The Galil Shanu, the Chamer Adif Mimishcha, their wine is even more valuable than oil. So in Galil, in fact, the oil was Ba'ayin Ra. So now that we've established that when someone's makdish ba'ayin ra, so now there's shver on Reb Chisda, because Reb Chisda said that the white oxen are superior, but from our Mishnah you see that the white oxen are inferior. Zakimar Reisha Kashal Reb Chisda, only Reb Chisda, no problem. Normally, black oxen are just as good as white oxen. I was speaking about a very specific type of oxen, the oxen from Karmenoi. He Amri Betur the Karmenoi. Oxen of Karmenoi, there the whites are the best. But in a regular city with a regular oxen, each particular color has its own benefits. Therefore, I wouldn't say my halacha. It wasn't halacha, he was giving advice, business advice. The white of Karmenoi are the best. Reb Chisda said another comment. He said, Uchma l'moshre. The best hides, if you want to process hide, the best animals to do that with are black hides. Sumka, the red animals, lubisra are best for meat. So if you want an animal that's going to have really good meat, find a red one. Chayura, white animals, l'radya, they're very active animals, they're strong, they're not lazy, they're good to plow with, to do work with. So they each have different benefits and different features, but one is not considered superior for the other. The problem is we have the Reb Chisda that we learned earlier, via Amar Reb Chisda, uchma b'chayura lakya, meaning white's always the best. So you're right, he said both things. He Amar Batur the Karmenoi. By Tur the Karmenoi, their white is better, hands down. But by any other type of oxen, each color has their own benefits. Beautiful. When someone makes a commitment, he wants to give the bare minimum that will meet his commitment. I hear, because Hevel. So I guess we take after Cain. We take after Cain. We still haven't learned. But the difference is, we might take after Cain, but we're not going to kill Hevel. If you want to give more, you give whatever you want. Just don't impose it on me. Okay, gewaltig. Zog to Gemara weiter. Misha Nodar ben Nazir. Someone was makabel upon himself Naziris, and then he decided this is not for me, and I'm going to be shoyal. And he had a good excuse for sure. I'm going to ask the Rav. For sure, the Rav's going to be matter for me, and because of that, I'm not going to get to the Rav for a couple of weeks. I'm going to drink wine because I know anyway they're going to be matter. And then and then the Rav said, sorry, I can't do it for you. So it's a very schwer Mishnah. The Mishnah says, so go to the different Rav. So the Mishnah doesn't say that. So the Mishnah says, Moina Misha Shanodar. Don't think that just because you drank wine, you have to recount. You can actually continue to count. So let's say, for instance, someone was makabel Nazirs for 100 days, and after 90 days of drinking wine, he gets to the Rav, assuming he's going to get his heter, and the Rav said no heter. He just got to keep another 10 days without drinking wine, and he's good to go. Cutting hair probably the same as well. The only thing where it wouldn't be the same is by tumah, because tumah we know is soiser, but the wine is no problem. What happens if he got lucky and nishal lachacham vehetira and hoisaloi behema mufreshes? He thought he was a nazir, and therefore he set aside an animal for his naziris. Now it turns out he wasn't a nazir because the chacham was mater his naziris. So as Toshus told us earlier about the same Mishnah, teitze v'tira be'eder. Someone who's not a nazir cannot be mafresh korban naziris. So it invalidates his hektish in the first place. That's like someone who's not mechuyev a korban chatos being matash a korban chatos. You can't do it; it won't even work because you're not mechuyev a korban chatos. So we know that Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai had this old dispute as to whether or not hektish b'tos is hektish, and this is a clear manifestation of a hektish b'tos that's not hektish. So Amar Beis Hillel Beis Shammai iatem oidim bazeh shehu hektish toes, sheteitze v'tir be'eder. You agree in this case of Naziris that was uprooted l'mafreya, that his carbon is null and void. So isn't that a proof that hektish b'tois is not hektish? Going back to the last Mishnah, Amulam Beishamai responded, you have a very nice raya from there that hektish b'tois is hektish, but I'm going to show you another place where hektish, you have a nice raya from there, hektish b'tois is not hektish. I'm going to show you from Meiser that hektish b'tois is hektish. Iyatemoidim. That's right. Iyatemoidim. Don't you agree to me? The mishata b'kara l'chi asiri ula asiri chi ula echarasar asiri. If you count animals one by one, and when you get to number 10, that animal becomes a Ma'asher Behema. What if you mistakenly counted number 9 as number 10, or number 11 is number 10? Shuma Kudish. Everybody does Kudish. So that's Hektish B'tois. So B'shami tells Basili, you bring me your eye from there, I'll bring your eye from Meiser. That Hektish B'tois is good Hektish. Amalem Basil said, that's not Al Hektish B'tois, and I'll prove it to you that's not Al Hektish B'tois. It's not the stick that the owner touched the animal with, which means Hektish B'tois. That's what did it. And I'll prove it to you that it can't be that. Because if it was that, no matter what animal we called number 10 should be Kadosh. And it's not true. It's only the two animals, 9 and 11, are the only two animals that we could mistakenly call 10. What if by mistake he counted number 8 as number 10, or number 12 as number 10? Shema also klum. Everybody agrees that wouldn't become Meiser. So it's clearly not Hektish B'tois. There's clearly a different mechanism that's making 9 and 11 Kadosh. Ella, what is it? It's Exeris HaKosov, Ela Kosov, Shakidus HaSiri, Hukidish HaChi, Pesachadosar. The pasuk that tells us that works, but it's not because of Hektish B'tois. So it seems like Beis Shammai didn't have a retort, but we're going to see there's an epilogue to this story that we're going to soon see. Interesting to note, Reb Schwab asks, why is it that when you give Ma'aseh Behema, you have to count out 9? Why don't you count your whole herd? Let's say you have 1,000 animals, and then you give 100 animals. Zucker, why do you have to go through this tedious process? Zucker Reb Schwab, a person could think 100 animals to give away, that's a lot of money. So Hashem said, no, that's not how you do it. 1 for you, 2 for you, 3 for you, 8 for you, 9 for you. No, 1 you can give away. So the purpose of Meiser is for us to acknowledge and appreciate the goodness that we have, the wonderful life that we have in the Rebbeinu Shalom. Then it's going to be easy for us to give away 1/10. Oh, thank you very much. My wife told me that she read an interview from a big financial guru by the name of Mercy. Did you ever hear of such a guy? Moshe Rubner told me he heard of the guy. And this Mercy guy said that statistically, people who tithe, people who give Meiser, have a much lower divorce rate than people who don't. And he says the reason is because people who are less selfish, who are more willing to give away and to share, they're also less likely to have a problem in marriage. Interesting enough. Okay, Zok the Gemara. Zok the Heilige Mishnah weiter. Or the Heilige Gemara weiter. We're now on Lamed Beis Amud Aleph. We're finally on Friday's block. Zok the Gemara. Mani Masnis. This Mishnah that says that there's no consequence whatsoever for someone who drank wine freely during his Naziris, he doesn't have to make up a single day. Who is this Mishnah consistent with? Loi Rabbi Yosy v'loi Rabban. It will not be consistent with Rabbi Yosy or the Rabbanon who we're about to quote. The Tanya, Misha Nodar, someone who was Makabal Naziris, v'avar al Nazirusay, and he was over in his Naziris. He drank wine the whole time, and now at the end of the Naziris, he's coming like a tzaddik to the Kohen with his animals ready to discharge his Naziris. Ein Yishkakin. You do not allow him to discharge his Naziris. Ella Imkain, and the Bach says, Ella Imkain, where's my Bach? Ella Imkain, Noyeg Bohen Iser Kiyomim Shenog Bamheter. So let's say, for instance, there was 100-day Naziris, and for 95 of those days, he drank wine. So 5 days later comes, he can't just bring his karbonis, he has to make up those 95 days. Rabbi Yosy Omer, no, you don't have to make up 95 days. Dayoy Shloshim Yom. We'll make him make up 30 days. But either way, he has to make up. Our mission is you don't have to make up anything. So I'm going to read the Girsa not like what it says in our Gemara, like Tosfos is various. Irabonim kasha afilu naziris meruba. According to the Rabbanan, even Naziris Maruba is a kasha. So there's two cases where we could look at. We could look at someone who was just Makabal a 30-day Naziris, and we could look at someone who was Makabal a 100-day Naziris. So let's look at it according to the Rabbanan. If someone was Makabal a 30-day Naziris and he violated for 30 days, you got to keep all 30 days again. That's inconsistent with the Mishnah that says you can keep those days, you can count those days. If a guy had 100-day Naziris and he violated 95 of those days, you got to count them over. Again, it's inconsistent with the Mishnah. Rabbi Yosy, but even according to Rabbi Yosy, who holds that there's only 30 days, you might want to kvetch. Because if it's a Naziris Meruba and you violated all the days, you don't have to make them all up. You only have to make up 30 days. The Mishnah says you can count them all. So let's go back to the Mishnah and let's do a little bit of a kvetch in the Mishnah. You could learn, and it shouldn't be a kvetch, the Gemara is going to end up saying that. You could learn the Mishnah means, moina mishas another, some of the days that you counted, you can use. You can use some of those days, but not all of those days. So for instance, if someone had a long Naziris of 100 days and he violated the whole time, he still can count 70 of those days. So according to Rabbi Yosy, he only has to make up 30 days. So you have a way for Rabbi Yosy to explain the Mishnah if the Mishnah is speaking about 100-day Naziris. But if the Mishnah is speaking about only a 30-day Naziris, even according to Rabbi Yosy, you cannot use any of those days. So therefore, Rabbi Yosy kasher Naziris mu'etis, and that's the gears of change. So who is our Mishnah going like? Zok Gemara, it was so exciting to learn the Mishnah that you could violate your Naziris with no consequence. That's not what the Mishnah meant at all. Actually, our Mishnah would fit in just fine according to either one. Our Mishnah that says you can count is speaking by a long Naziris. Since it's 100 days and you only have to make up 30 days, we'll fartaich the Mishnah, like we said earlier, that some of those days you can reuse. By Naziris Mu'etes, that's where Rabbi Yosy says 30 days means you'll really have to do over your whole Naziris. But our Mishnah is not speaking about that. The boy said, what about the Rabbanan who said you got to make up all the days? How does that fit in with the Mishnah? Zok Gemara, when the Mishnah says, Moine Mishash Another, Loitem Mishash Another, it doesn't mean you count those days. It means you recount those days. So therefore, you have to do them all. So when we learned the Mishnah, it sounded great, no problem. Now you're going to see the Mishnah doesn't mean that. The Mishnah means you got to recount all of the days according to the Rabbanan. Zok to Gemara weiter. Nishal lechachamim v'tirua. Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Yirmiyah said, Midu Beishamai, from Beishamai who holds hektish b'tois is hektish. Nishmal de Beisil, who although he holds hektish b'tois is not hektish, but tumura b'tos, everybody agrees is a tumura. Lav Omri Beishamai. Beishamai said hektish b'tos of a hektish. Yet in this case, since it turned out that he was never able to be makdish the behemoths of Naziris because he was never a Nazir, Kivin the Glay Milsa, the Lav Shapri Nazar, therefore, this animal can go right back on the shelf with no restocking fee. L'Beisil Nami, according to Beisil, by Tumura, where even Beisil agrees Tumura's tos is a Tumura, Avagab the Amri Tumura but tos have a Tumura, Hanamili Heicha the Isal Iker Hektish. So someone said, I reizu Tumuras Oila, it's going to be a Tumuras Oila. But that's only if the original Oila is a legitimate carbon. What if he was shoyal on the original hektish when he was makdish, the original animal for the oila? It was never an oila to begin with. It was nekalim afreya. So then isakar nami tamura. There it wouldn't be a tamura either. Zok Gemara weiter. Omar mar iatemoidim shilukara l'chiyasiri. So we have this rule that by meiser, if you by mistake call number 9 or number 11, you call it number 10, it will still be meiser. Is that only if you made a mistake, or is that even if you did it on purpose? Itmar, Meiser, Rab Nachman Amar to Usoi Veloy Kavanosoi. It only works if you did it by mistake, not if you did it on purpose. Rav Chisda, Barabba Barafuna Amri to Usoi, the Choshen Kavanosoi. If you didn't even mean to make it Kodesh, it's Kodesh. Surely, if you had intent to make it Kodesh, it should be Kodesh. Yeah. Well, the pasuk says if you does the pasuk mean only if you made a mistake, or does the pasuk mean even if you did it on purpose? So Amalei Rabba Rav Nachman. Rabba told Rav Nachman, Lididach, according to you, Rav Nachman, the Amr to Usay Veloy Kavanasay. You cannot purposely make the wrong animal into Meiser. The Kamri Beishamai LeBeisil. Beishamai had a kasha to Beisil. What did they say in our Mishnah? Don't you also agree that hektish batos is hektish because she ilukara l'chi asiri ula asiri chi ula achad osir asiri shloshtam nikudoshim. V'ishtiku Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel didn't respond. They were quiet. Oh, last time I had to prompt them. I was waiting for them to ask. Beis Hillel had a very good answer. Beis Hillel said, "What are you talking about? There's a kosev. It doesn't work for 8 and 12." So Tosfos says that they were being brisk. Compared to what he could have said, doesn't have teretz. He could have had a much better teretz. Yeah. Why do you bring a new factor involved? You could have displayed and revealed how Beis Shammai's logic is faulty from within. Why would Beis Shammai's logic have been faulty from within? How could you bring me a raya for Meiser? Lamer lahain mala Meiser shekein einay kadosh b'chavana. Meiser is different. It's not kadosh b'chavana. Hektish, if you want to make something hektish, you're allowed to make whatever you want hektish. Meiser, you cannot make whatever you want hektish. So Meiser is different. So what do you bring me a raya for Meiser? Your raya doesn't even start. That's what Beis Hillel could have said, and he didn't. Why not? According to Rav Nachman, why didn't Beis Hillel come up with this taina? It's a better taina. Amar Absimi Berashi, you know why Beis Hillel couldn't say the taina? Because Beis Shammai would have turned it around on him, and he would have said, "Hainu taima deloy amri lahain," because it's the kavachaymerhu. Ma meiser she'enei kadosh b'chavana kadosh b'tos madach meiser, which b'chavana doesn't work. It's kadosh b'tos hektish a kadosh b'chavana hektish, which is predisposition to becoming kadosh, because it can become kadosh even in circumstances where meiser cannot, like kolshka, and surely it should surely be kadosh b'tos. So that's why Beis Hillel didn't make this argument, because Beis Shammai could have undone him. But Zokter Psimi Velohi, Beis Shammai couldn't have undone him. Beis Hillel is right to have been able to have asked this kasha. The hektish bedaited the moratali. Hektish, we know him. You have to be makdish bedas. You have to want to be makdish something. So therefore, you wouldn't say kol shekei shaloi b'kavana. Kol shekei if it was a mistake, because hektish is based on knowing what you're saying when you're being makdish something. So therefore, Beis Hillel actually has a much better argument to refute Beis Shammai's taina. So then the question goes back: why did he say the inferior argument if he could have said a superior argument? So Zokt Tosfos, I'll read it in Tosfos inside. Tosfos says, let me see if I can find the right Tosfos that I'm looking for. It's somewhere over here. Zokt Tosfos, v'loy kasha l'Rab Nachman, I'm on Daf Lamed Gimel Lamed Beis, towards the bottom on the second column. V'loy kasha l'Rab Nachman, amai loy hishiva Beis Hillel b'nei ubei. And it's not fair why Beis Hillel didn't ask a better kasha to undo Beis Shammai's argument from within. The Ikal Meimer, the Beis Hillel chad betrei tami noket. He has 2 questions. He asked this one. You like this one better? He liked that one better. Don't be such a brisker. Gewaltig. Zogt the heilige Gemara weiter. Mishnah. Okay. Misha Nader ben Nazir. Someone who was Nader ben Nazir. And when you're Nader ben Nazir, you realize there's going to be expenses. You have karbanos you're going to have to bring. Even if it works out, you don't become tamei, there's big expenses. You have 3 animals to bring. And he was going now to bring his behemoths. He went to the barn to get behemoths, to bring them to the base of Mikdash. And he opens the door and they're gone. What's he supposed to do now? And now he's thinking of, had I known that now I have to come up with another set of animals, I don't know where am I getting the money from? Had I known, I would have never become a Nazir in the first place. So the halacha is, if the animals were there in his shed when he was makabel Naziris, and they only went missing later, harei a Nazir. You cannot, it's not a good Pesach. So you might ask, why isn't it a good Pesach? It's a very legitimate thing. Had I known it would be stolen, I would never have done it. So Tosfos goes through this very carefully. We're not going to do the whole Tosfos, but we'll jump around. Zok Tosfos. I'm right over here on the daf. Why is that not a good Pesach? I would have never made a nether if I would have known that I have to do it twice. Even though it did become stolen at the end, he cannot be matter. The Chacham cannot be matter by asking him, had you known that your animal would have been stolen, would you have made the Nazirs? You know why? Shezahu noilad. This is a new thing called noilad. You're only allowed to use as a Pesach something that's in existence, not something that's new. And this needs a lot of clarification. Where do you draw the line? It was stolen after the Kabbalah Neder. Had it been stolen before the Kabbalah Neder, which is the next case in our Mishnah, then it's a good Pesach. Had you known that right now the animal's not even there, you just think it's there, how would you have made the Naziris? No, that's a good Pesach. But that it will be stolen, that's Noilat. That's a circumstance that does not exist yet. The entire effect Toisvis, Valmi the Chashvinin b'Chal Pesach, Kiyamar Leia Daitim another. The gears isn't so good. He changed it. But what Toshvis is asking is, I don't understand. Isn't that what every Pesach is? Had you known this, you wouldn't have made the nether. So what's the difference? Noilad, not noilad. At the end of the day, I would have never made the nether had I known this. So what's the problem with that? And then your circumstance could have been if I would have known this. I didn't know that. In every Pesach, if something occurred, and had I known that would happen, I would have done it. And this is an extremely yesodistic for all of Nazir and the Dorim, because it tells us what you could use as a Pesach and what not, and it's an eye-opener as to how the heter of a Chacham works. I never realized this until I learned this Tosis. Things that are relatively common that could occur, will say that when a person makes a neder, he does think about things that could occur that would make him regret his nether. And therefore, when I make a nether, I think of all the common things that could occur that would make me not want to have made the nether. And in fact, in my mind, I actually exclude those things. And I'm telling myself right now when I make the nether, if any of those things occur, I actually wouldn't want the nether now. That's how it works. And I'm going to skip a little bit. But in the case where the animal got stolen, which we'll see in a moment what that case is, that's something that's uncommon. And therefore, or when I make the Naziris, it wouldn't even dawn on me to think that maybe it would get stolen. It's such an unusual, unlikely thing. And since it's so unusual and unlikely, Zaktaisis Lukach Gomar, Venoder Belibay Bechol Inyan, Shia Nazir, Vafilu Tikon Behemtoy. Why? Since I don't think it's going to happen at all, I'm not excluding that in my kavanah when I'm in Kabbalah by Naziris. Only something that is relatively common that it could happen. So it's unbelievable. So now I used to think that the Chacham comes up with a Pesach. No, the Chacham is showing that when you made a neder, you actually excluded if this would happen. He's showing you that in your neder was built in an exclusion if one of the things that you're making a Pesach happen. But
that's in a place where there are no.
I don't care.
That's in a place where there are no ganavim. But if there are ganavim, you do
definitely
have.
Not in Toronto. It's definitely not in Toronto. That's right. It must be the place where stealing behemoths is unlikely. And listen, in those days they used to charge $1 for hay. So we can all recall another example of Noilad. One of the most famous Nedarim was Rabbi Kiva Shver made a neder that Rabbi Kiva's you're not going to get a nickel from me, right? And then he came back and he turned out he was a God Lador, and the Shver said, yeah, maybe I'll give you a nickel, right? But the problem is he made a neder. So Rabbi Kiva asked him, had you known that I would be a Talmud Chacham, would you have made a neder? And he said, Talmud Chacham, had I known you would even open a sefer, I would have never made such a neder. And they were matter his neder. Toys was asked there, that's Noilad. He was a regular Amoritz. It's completely unfathomable that somehow this guy's going to become a God Lador. Right? When you see a regular shepherd you're never going to think your auto mechanic, your boiler mechanic, you can become a God Lador. It doesn't stem. It's like totally off the charts. So how is that a good Pesach? The fact is, anyone who applies himself to sit and learn can become a master Talmid Chacham. So it's not Noilad. It's Noilad that your animal can get stolen. That's very uncommon. But for someone to become a Talmid Chacham, that's simple. It's in the bank. Someone that puts an effort, it's in the bank, will become a Talmid Chacham. So that's not Noilad. Unbelievable. Okay. Zogt the Heilige Mishnah weiter. Ve'im Mishnignav behemtoi. What if at the time when he was Makabel Naziris, unbeknownst to him, his animal was already missing, Nazar, he made the Naziris, and in Nazar, because that's really a Naziris Patos. He made it under the assumption that he had animals. And this idea that a noilad is not a good Pesach to be matar and eder, v'zutos to Nachum Hamadi. This is the mistake. This is the mistake that Nachum Hamadi made, because before the first Churban Bayis, there was a group of people who was Makabel Nazirs, and of course they were Makabel Nazirs under the assumption that they're going to be able to bring their Karbanis and discharge the Nazirs. They weren't bringing Makabel Nazirs under the assumption that they'll never get out of it because they can't bring Karbanis. So Kisha'ol Nazir min Agoyla, Umatu Beis HaMikdash Charav, there were some Nazirim in Chutz La'aretz who didn't get the WhatsApp that the Beis HaMikdash was Charav. They came up, they were Makabel Nazirs, and now they can't discharge it. They were coming to discharge their Nazirs, and they cannot. Amalem Nachum Hamadi, don't worry about it. Ilu ha'yisem yoidim shebeis hamikdash charav. Had you known that the Beis Hamikdash was going to become charav in the future, ha'yisem noizrim, would you have made the Nazirs? Amalei, of course not. We didn't want to make a Nazirs that we couldn't get out of. V'tiran Nachum Hamadi. So Nachum Hamadi says, you know what? You're fine. Your Nazirs is bottom. Ucheshabah davar etzel chachamim. And when the Chachamim heard about this, they said that Reb Nachman Hamadi was wrong. Rather, Kol Shenazar at Shaloi Charav Beis HaMikdash. Anybody who made his Nazirs before the Beis HaMikdash was Charav, he's going to be a Nazir, because it's a complete noilad. It's a wild thing that the Beis HaMikdash is going to be destroyed. Nobody would have anticipated it. This is Bais Rishon. Yes, Bais Rishon. Yeah. But if someone was Makabel Nazirs after the Beis HaMikdash was Charav already, because he didn't know about it, that's already under a false pretense. That's like
there was Nevi'us
after the animal was stolen, and you know it. I'm sorry?
There was Nevi'us that there's going to be a Beis HaMikdash, a car Beis HaMikdash.
Oh, Gavaltic, that's the Gemara's kasha. What do you mean they didn't know? Of course they knew. So
That's
why
right. They were warning
for
for decades. They were warning that the Beis HaMikdash.
Exactly. Oh, so we're going to get there. We're going to get there. Beautiful kasha. Oh, Gavaltic. Amar Rabba. Rabba said, Shatfua Rabbanan Rebbe Eliezer. Shatfua to me means he got like bowled over in a tidal wave, right? Shatfua Nahar. So Rebbe Eliezer was blown over by his friends. Why? Because we know originally Rebbe Eliezer took the same position as Nachum Hamadi, because Shatfua Rabbanan Rebbe Eliezer v'kmu b'shitasayu d'tnan poischin b'noilad divi Rebbe Eliezer v'chacham Moshe. So where do you see that Rebbe Eliezer was chayzer? Very simple. Rebbe Eliezer was around by the Churban Bayis, because the Gemara tells us that Rebbe Eliezer was one of the Nosei Mita of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was the one who made the Takanas by Churban Bayis. He was right there by Churban Bayis. Rebbe Eliezer was right after Churban Bayis. So he was there when these Chachamim were talking, and you don't find that he interjected, hey, I agree with Nachum Hamadi, right? It just says, Amru, and he didn't, no one seemed to have caused any dispute. So you see from this Mishnah that even though there was a point in time where Rebbe Eliezer held Peischem B'Noilad, he was blown over by them and he accepted their psak. Rava said, even though you can't be Peischem B'Noilad, had you known that the Beis HaMikdash would be Charav in the future, you could be Peischem with a Tanai that's not Noilad, that actually could happen now. What does it mean, a Tanai Noilad? Hey Chidami, Amr Lahain, you could tell these Nazirim, Ilu Asa Inish, if someone would have came to you when you're Bekabel your Naziris, well, Amr Lahain and told you the Charav Beis HaMikdash, if someone would have came and told you then, it's possible that's not Noilad. Someone can come right now and tell me the Beis HaMikdash was Charav. Me having the Drizim, would you have made an ether? You wouldn't have, because you would have been afraid. So therefore, if the Pesach is that the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed in the future, that's an Noilad. But if the Pesach is someone telling you that it was destroyed, or telling you that it might likely be destroyed, that's already a realistic Pesach, and that would have worked. Amar B'Yosef, if I was there when these geniuses were Makabel Naziris under such a precarious situation, Havamin Lahain, I would have told them exactly what Beryl first would have told them, exactly what David Zolti would have told them. Haksiv Heichal Hashem, Heichal Hashem, and we learn Heichal Hashem, Hema Zem Mikdash Rishon and Mikdash Sheni. It's talking about the Churban Bayis. Hashem told us that they're going to be destroyed. It says Heichal Hashem, Heichal Hashem, Hema, meaning they're going to be destroyed. So everybody knew it was going to be destroyed. Now, this still wouldn't have been a Pesach because it's Noilad. But he would have told them, why are you doing such a stupid thing? the Beis Hamikdash will get destroyed, and you're going to be stuck. Zok the Gemara, the Yadin Lahain, the Achrayt. Sure, they knew it would be Charav. Yes, but me Yadin Leimasai, no one knows when, and he's going to say, yeah, it won't happen in my days. Exactly like Duvi says. Amar Abaye, what do you mean V'lo Yadin Leimas? We have a pasuk that told us exactly when the second Beis Hamikdash would be Charav. V'ksiv Shavuayim Shivim Nechtach Al Amech. Oh, so I'm sorry. This is the second Beis Hamikdash. I'm very sorry. This is the second Beis Hamikdash. I'm totally wrong. You are talking about second Beis Hamikdash. So what are the?
Yeah, I figured it would be the second Beis Hamikdash, but there are no Nevi'im in the second Beis Hamikdash to predict that.
But we had a pasuk that says Shavuim Shivim Nechtach, which means it will be 70 Shemitah years. 70 times 7 is 490. When at the beginning of the Golus Rishon, they were told Shivim Nechtach, which means the next Beis Hamikdash is going to be destroyed in 490 years. So there was a Golus of 70 years, and then the second Beis Hamikdash lasted 420. So they knew that after 490 years, the second Beis Hamikdash would be destroyed. So how could you be so careless to be Mekabel Nazirs? So Gemara, I was Mekabel Nazirs for 45 days. I knew the Beis Hamikdash would be destroyed, but so fast, I figured there'd be some time. So Duvi, not only are you right long term, even short term, even if you know it's happening this year, it's happening this year, but it's not going to happen mamish. Now it'll happen tomorrow. What? That's right. So I'll call upon them. It's not a good idea to be Makabel Nazirs if you have no idea how you're going to discharge. There's a famous rule with lawyers: never ask a question on the stand that you don't already know the answer to. Right? So don't be Makabel Nazirs unless you know exactly when it's going to be discharged. Gewaltig. Now we're going to learn a Mishnah that we already learned thoroughly, because it's the Mishnah from where we prove that Beis Shammai holds that hektish v'tos is hektish. Hoyu mahalchem b'derech, and Tosfos tells us that shisha shehoyu mahalchem b'derech. There's 6 guys walking down the street. The echad v'kenegdan, and an unknown figure is coming and approaching them. Amar echad mahen. One of these 6 people said, Hareini Nazir shezeh ploni. I'm a Nazir if that's Reuven. The echad amar Hareini Nazir she'ein zeh ploni. And someone said, oh yeah, I'm a Nazir if this is not Reuven. And then the third guy said, Hareini Nazir she'echad became Nazir. I'm a Kabbalah Nazirs if one of you are a Nazir, and surely one of them is. Or someone said, Hareini Nazir she'ein echad became Nazir. I'm a Nazir if one of you aren't a Nazir, which is also true. And then already he said not true things. Hareini Nazir she'shnechem Nazir, and they're not both. Or she'kulchem Nazir. There Beis Shammai arim kul Nazirin, and this is where we prove that he wants to be Makabel Nazirs anyway. He just thought he could show off his knowledge, and that was a mistake. But hektish v'tois have a hektish. We still learn Einei Nazir elami shaloi niskaimu devara. Who's the Nazir? The one who wasn't niskaim his words, which is shver, because in fact it should say Einei Nazir elami sheniskaimu devara. The guy whose condition was fulfilled becomes a Nazir. So the Gemara is going to deal with that. No matter what, you're not a Nazir. And Tosfos tells us, we learned this before, that Reb Tarfon holds Nazirs is bahaflah. It has to be clearly articulated. And at the time when he said, I'm going to be a Nazir, if that's Reuven, it's not known if that's Reuven. That's not a good Kabbalah Nazirs, even if it turns out being Reuven. Because at the time you articulated, it wasn't crystal clear that you're being Kabbalah Nazirs. What happens if Hirsi Allah Chayrim? Reuven was coming close, but then he turned around. So now you never know if it was Reuven or not. So let's think. According to Beis Shammai, it doesn't make a difference. Because according to Beis Shammai, no matter what, you're a Nazir. So there's really challenge according to Beis Hillel. According to Beis Hillel, you're only a Nazir if the condition is met. What if now you cannot discover if the condition was met? Einei Nazir wouldn't be a Nazir. Why not? Why isn't it a Suffolk Nazirs? So the Gemara is going to tell us shortly. We once had a Rabbi Yehuda. If you remember the Rabbi Yehuda that we had, and the Gemara is going to bring it again. Rabbi Yehuda had a halacha that if someone said, in this pile there's 10 kur of wheat, and if there is, then I want to be a Nazir. And then when you go to count it, it was stolen. So Rabbi Yehuda says, no matter what, it's not a Nazir, not even a Suffolk Nazir, because someone would never be Mekabel upon himself anything that its Suffolk would be worse than its Vadai. Nobody wants to get into such a mess. And here, the Suffolk Nazirs would be worse than the Vadai. So if you think about it, why would the Suffolk Nazirs be worse than the Vadai? If you're a Nazir, I'm not. If I'm a Nazir, you're not. Because we both had inverse Nazirism. You said if it is Reuven, I said if it's not Reuven. So why should that be a problem? If one of us are Nazirin, We'll both keep the Nazirs. Karbanas at the end will have one set, and we'll say, if you're the Nazir, they're yours. If I'm the Nazir, they're mine. So how is it costing more the suffix than the Vadai? The teretz is Giluach. We both have to take haircuts. So the suffix is worse than the Vadai, because with the Vadai, only one of us has to take haircuts. But now we both have to take haircuts. So therefore, since the suffix is worse than the Vadai, Rabbi Yehuda holds a person will never intend to get himself into a suffix if it's worse than the Vadai. So therefore, if it turns out that it turns into a suffix because this fellow turns the corner and we never find out who he is, under those circumstances, the person never meant to be Makabel Nazirs. But Rabbi Shimon says a person does enter himself into a suffix, and therefore he's a suffix Nazir. Both these people are a suffix Nazir. Omer, he says, Yayamer, he should say, if I'm right, Hareni Nazir, I'm the Nazir, Hareni Nazir Chayva, Imlav, Hareni Nazir Nadava. And if not, I'm a Nazir Nadava. So therefore, each person has to be Makabel on himself a full Naziris, and therefore, regardless, he'll be able to bring the Karbanis. I'm sorry? I'm in Makabel upon myself a Naziris, a voluntary Naziris. The Nazir Chayva was because I connected it to a T'nai, so then it's a mandatory Naziris. But this is an optional Naziris. So I feel bad that we're a blot behind. We're a full blot behind. So tomorrow we're gonna have to learn 2 full blots. Okay, Shkoyach.
Oh, yeah, there's only a half a block tomorrow.
That's right. So it's not so bad. It sounds worse than it is. Okay, Shkoyach, we'll learn tomorrow.